if someone want to become a application security expert, what are the skills he required?
Security expert, a lot of people, there is this viewpoint that I just need to do pen testing, bug bounty, and I become an application security expert.
What is application? What is AppSec?
Now, this actually is what really DevSecOps has come to solve. I mean,
And how you started journey also,
Started off as a CPA, which is basically the equivalent of a CA in India.
This is one of the icebreaker part. This guy is from CPA background, CA background, and moving and doing a lot of content AppSec. It's truly amazing. Because until unless you don't know how solution work, you cannot able to break it, either secure it. Do you have any recommendation for the viewers?
To be honest, I really think that the best place to learn anything from is just YouTube.
What should be the first language they should learn?
See, the easiest is to learn Python.
What is actually DevSecOps and how it is different from the traditional DevOps?
I always tell people that DevSecOps is basically what AppSec should have been in the first place.
So hi team, welcome to the session on Coffee with Prabh, and today we have a Mr. Special Guest, Mr. Abhay. Abhay, as an expert in application security and the founder of AppSecEngineer. He has been a forefront for the application security, cybersecurity industry for a decade, and with a focus on protecting application and ensuring initially BC compliance, but now end-to-end everything. And he passionate about sharing his knowledge on AppSec, and he has a great insight and wisdom on AppSec, which I saw in multiple content, and I thought, let me ping him. And it is a great honor for us to have him on this platform where he can share his insight on AppSec and other aspects. Thank you, Abhay, for taking on the time. I know it's post Diwali and taking on the time in the busy schedule for the society. It's really commendable.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very glad to be here and very happy you reached out. I'm always looking for voices in the community to share things with and also to discuss things with. And you are definitely a very vocal and very important voice in our community, because I see a lot of your posts talking to different skill levels in the information security space. And that's very important. We need people addressing all levels of skills, right? So it's not only advanced, but we also need people talking about basics, people entering. Now I'm looking at doing a CISSP or something like that. So I've seen a lot of your content in that side of the fence, and that's very important. And I think you're doing a commendable job on that front as well.
Thanks, Abhay. Thank you so much, Abhay. Abhay, I basically saw a lot of content around your CI/CD pipeline, then secure by default, shift left. I think from your post only, I got a great insight on shift left, to be frank. And based on that, I prepare a small shots on the Insta and all that. So thank you for bringing those attention. And people have a lot of dilemma about cybersecurity is all about pen testing, which is not true.
At least application security, a lot of people just think it's pen testing.
Yeah. So before we start anything about the main agenda, I thought, can you share your viewpoint on, what is application, what is AppSec, and what do you see as a potential of AppSecs and all that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean,
and how you started the journey also.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, just to let's start with the last question first, which is how did I start? I actually didn't have anything to do with application security. I started off as a CPA, which is basically the equivalent of the CA in India, right? So I qualified as a CPA and I qualified as an accountant. I finished my exams, I cleared, I was doing all that stuff. And then I was like, I don't want anything to do with finance and balance sheets and all of that stuff. I was kind of bored.
CPA. CA. Oh my God. So you actually breaking that myth about for AppSec, you need to have a hard coding and all that. But I'm sure coding is required, but you setting this benchmark. I never seen this part of Mr. Abhay on any LinkedIn. Guys, I'm sure this is the first podcast. I'm sure I've seen 2-3 podcasts of Abhay, and I think this is one of the icebreaker part. This guy is from CPA background, CA background, and moving and doing a lot of content AppSec. It's truly amazing. And I'm sure after this podcast, Abhay, this will be a great benchmark for the people who have this mindset that non-coders cannot do AppSec.
No, absolutely. In fact, some of the most unique insights in the world, if you look at even some of the chaps who created programming languages, some of the people, James Gosling himself, I think he was who created Java. He was a meteorological engineer or something like that. A lot of the people who come into the IT industry are not even from that industry. They provide very unique insights, and I like to think of myself as one of those people who has come in from a completely different space and provided my insights. Of course, now I think I've been so long in this space. I've been in this space for like 15 plus years, so I think I've become an IT guy in the true sense of the term. But really, I started my career there, and one of the things that I wanted to do as soon as I finished my CPA was I wanted something. I was always good with technology, so I used to write a lot of code. And there was this. I don't know if I mean I don't know if you know or your listeners may know, obviously, but uh, there's this very popular accounting software in India called Tally, very
Tally,
very
yeah,
popular.
yeah, yeah.
So I used to write a lot of code customizing Tally for customers. So I used to be deeply into that piece, right? My father even now runs a Tally distribution business, and at that time I used to work with him, and I used to do a lot of code. I used to write a lot of integrations, a lot of XML stuff, a lot of that stuff. And for me, that gave me my initial understanding of technology and building applications in the first place, right? So a lot of people used to interface their SAP ERPs with Tally. They had to do integrations, they had to pull data, push data, do batch, all that stuff. And coming from a business background gave me a very unique insight into security, because end of the day, security issues are business issues, or business issues are security issues, right? So there is a very deep interplay between business and security. And I think a lot of my understanding of application security, and even further on DevSecOps, and now with AI and all that coming in, I think a lot of my experience has been shaped by this core idea that you have to solve business problems.
Hmm.
End of the day. So we are in security, but we are not actually solving security problems. We are solving business problems.
Hmm.
And security is a business problem. The problem is everybody thinks of security like some mythical creature. And a lot of us security professionals also, because we want to keep our job intact, we say that, oh, security is this, it's very complicated. You have to do it this way.
Hmm.
Nobody can understand it. Developers, no, you developers don't know anything, all that stuff. A lot of us make up these mythical, like these, we create like as if we are wizards or something, but it's not the case. It's very simple business problems. The problem is that because we have done this for so long, our security
Hmm.
industry has done this for so long, we've sold this image that we have got some unique skills, nobody can do this. It has become a thing that, oh, security, let's keep security aside and let's do our development by ourselves.
Hmm.
Now, this actually is what really DevSecOps has come to solve, if you look at it, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
If you look at, I mean, AppSec and what it's evolved to and what it should be evolving to, what we really want is to be partners with the development teams.
Hmm.
And the problem today is that security is seen as a different team, development is seen as a different team, and they don't really understand each other's problems.
Hmm.
I'm sure you've seen this, and I'm sure your other podcast guests have also said this, where security is seen as the enemy or the adversary of a development team. They're like
Agree.
you're only pointing out issues, and the security team is only creating friction. Development team is trying to go fast. Security team is adding speed
Hmm.
breakers all along the road, and they're not able to release their code on time. This is really the problem with, I mean, that led to DevOps, and
Hmm.
also now has led to DevSecOps and all of its modern
But
avatars.
Abhay, I want to interrupt here.
Yeah,
Your back graduation is BCom.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So mostly the BCom professionals either plan for okay, there we have a people who can go for MCA, BCA, or they can go for the computer applications there. Okay, but most of the crowd
yeah,
will go for CA, accounts,
yeah,
taxations, and all
yeah,
that.
yeah.
What was a sudden shift from BCom to cybersecurity or AppSec? Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was actually a very interesting shift for me because, see, like I said, I was always good with technology. So I wanted to do something at the intersection of audit and technology, right? At the intersection of these two disciplines. And
And
the
when you
only
started
thing
this,
that kind of,
when this thought comes in your mind after
when I
completing
was
of
about
the
18, yeah, I was about 19 years old that time,
okay,
around that time.
okay.
Yeah, so I was about 19 years old. That time, this thing came that, what, intersection of audit, which is something that I was already pursuing, and technology. What is this
Hmm.
intersection? The only thing that was kind of coming to mind was IT audit. Now, in
Hmm.
India at that time, for instance, there's nothing too much more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was nothing too much more than IT audit, right? There was
Hmm.
some. Yeah, but then it was just like IT audit. Okay, what is IT audit really, right? So then I did my CISA and then I did all that stuff. I passed my CISA, but even then
Mm,
that didn't give me too much clarity.
mm,
It was like, okay, yeah, this is some exam. I passed some exam. I know something. I solved a whole bunch of question papers. I cleared this
mm,
paper.
mm,
So
mm,
after that, only I started to think about it a little bit deeply. Then once I passed my CPA, then at the time, it was a very interesting thing that happened. My mother is a soft skills trainer. She used to train companies on international business etiquette and soft skills and all that stuff. One day, she received a call from the man who would be my boss.
mm,
He ran an information security company.
mm,
He still runs an information
mm,
security company called CISA. And she received a call from him and said he wanted some training for his people on international business etiquette and soft skills and stuff like that. And he said, I'm in information security. And that time I was looking for something to do with information security. So my mother said, "No, why don't you go and meet him?"
mm,
And I went and met with him, and over a single discussion, he hired me. And he was like, "Okay, this is good. Why don't you get started from Monday?" It was a Saturday, I think I met him, and we started on Monday. And Tuesday itself, I was packed off to an audit. So I was packed off to do an audit for this huge BPO in Gurgaon. I didn't know what the hell was happening, but I somehow managed, and I got pretty good at it very fast in the sense that
uh,
in about 6 months I had picked up a lot. I worked really hard in the initial days, but I really liked it because
mm,
this was something I really knew that I wanted to do. So I used to
mm,
do a lot of PCI work. I cleared my PCI. That time there was this PCI
mm,
QSA
mm,
exam
mm,
that you need to
mm,
write. I
mm,
finished that and I became a PCI QSA.
mm,
Uh, I started getting on the fast track of information security from that perspective, especially on PCI. And the good thing with PCI at the time was that PCI is a very prescriptive standard. It's not
mm,
like ISO 27001. I mean, I'm sure you know this, but
mm, mm,
uh,
mm,
ISO 27001 or SOC, which is a little bit more, kind of, hey, figure it out yourself type of thing. PCI
mm,
is like, you need to do encryption this way, you need to do firewalling this way, you need to do it this way. It was very specific, prescriptive guidance on what a company needs to do.
mm,
And if you actually use PCI, you'll actually become a pretty good information security professional. If you use PCI as the basis for your learning,
mhm,
you will actually become a pretty decent information security professional. So I used that as my like kind of baseline to
mm,
kind of increase my competence in the space. And I started to really enjoy working on applications.
mm,
So applications was, I think it still is requirement 6 of PCI. And applications was the big thing. I really enjoyed that one domain of it really, really well because this was 2008. And if you remember in 2008, things like SQL injection and all that were just being, at least in the Indian community, were just being floated around, right?
mm,
It was just people are seeing SQL injections. I found SQL injections all over the place. So I was seeing that this is something very. I use SQL injection, hook it up with Metasploit, and do all kinds of fancy stuff. So it was very interesting at that time. And that in 2008, I spoke at the OWASP. I decided,
mm.
I'm going to speak about this. And I was in my first year of being a security professional. I decided, you know what, I'm going to speak about this in New York. So let's just go and figure it out.
Directly.
So I spoke about, yeah, I was like, what's going to happen? Worst case, I'll
Mm,
be laughed at. No, so let them laugh, doesn't matter. So I was like, let's figure this out. And I spoke about PCI DSS and application security in an OWASP conference in New York.
okay.
Um, and that was the first time I started interacting with people who are working on this application security stuff. I met some very interesting people in that conference. I met Andres Riancho, who was working on W3F. I don't know. I
Okay.
think W3F now is an ancient tool, but at that time it was the
Biggest
cutting
thing. Yeah.
edge of
Yeah.
dynamic security testing. I met a bunch of people who would want to become, part of ISS and X Force and all of these folks, and it was very interesting for me. And then I started going deeper, deeper, and deeper, and deeper into AppSec, and that eventually became DevSecOps, which eventually became scaling cloud security, product security. Now it has become about how we can leverage AI
Mm.
and security. So it's that journey has been pretty interesting. Let's see where it takes us.
So, Abhay, I'm sorry, guys, this is not the agenda of the podcast, but the way Abhay has started this podcast about having a BCom, And definitely, a big reason of asking such questions is, there's a lot of gimmicks, there's a lot of dilemma around the people. Can the non-IT people can do the application security or DevSecOps, and you setting this benchmark. That's the reason I asked this question. I'm sorry for that, for
No,
the
no, no,
extension.
absolutely.
So
No, no,
before
absolutely. Yeah, no issues.
So,
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Like, I want to ask you one more important thing. If someone want to become a application security expert, okay, what
Yeah.
are the skills he required? I want your brutal advice because
Mhm,
there's a lot of information around the AppSec bug bounty and all that. So, could you
mhm.
clarify about what are the skills? What are the skills? What are the knowledge required to become a application security expert, and what kind of a okay, this is the first part of the question. Second part of the question is, any fresher who basically having an application development background, can he make a career in AppSec as early as possible in 2025 era or 2024 era? So how do you see this perspective?
Okay, yeah, both are very important questions, very interesting questions. Let me answer the first one and then get to the second one. So the first one is, how does somebody become an application security expert? Now, yeah, see, an application security expert, a lot of people, there is this viewpoint that I just need to do pen testing, bug bounty, bug bounty, bug bounty, and I become an application security expert. I don't necessarily agree with that viewpoint. The problem with the overall security space itself is that we have people who are mile wide and inch deep, right? So it's a big problem. Everybody is like very broadly focused on 20 different things and they don't go deep in any major thing. So that I think is a general issue with security. Everybody assumes that, okay, I can start making crazy money in bug bounty, so I'm going to start with bug bounty. And that is like the entry point. A lot of people get scammed and all kinds of training and all that stuff, which is one of the reasons I was very clear that I didn't want to do any bug bounty training in my life, because I was not, first of all, I don't think that that's a way to do your career, and I don't think that's a way to grow your career. But having said that, that has its place. Now, let me talk about how I think one should do it. I think really you need to have a good amount of, uh, I think you have at least a decent working amount of coding skills to begin with. I'll tell you
Hmm.
why that is important. Now, in an application, see, today's applications are very complicated, right? So I work with some of the world's largest companies to the some of the most technically sound startups. And if you see these companies, the way they build applications is at a different level, right? So they build, microservices, they have this, they have Kubernetes, they have service meshes, they have cloud native stuff that they're adopting, they're using authorization as code frameworks. They're doing things that are today gone beyond the scope of what you would traditionally call application security. Application security, when I started in that space, was basically I find XSS bugs, SQL injection bugs, CSRF bugs, maybe some IDARs here and there, and that was really the extent of the application security space. A lot of people today also are behaving like that is how applications are built. That's not the case anymore. Applications today are built with frameworks, and those frameworks are built with extensive amount of nested technology. Now, for you to understand nested technology, you need to understand technology. So never start application security with security. Always start application security with the application part of it, which is the
Great point.
technology part. Understand the technology deeply enough. It doesn't have to be a sequential process, right? You can start learning you can start learning coding technology, and then in the meantime do some bug bounty work, so that you get both the inside outside perspective. The problem is most people just stick to pen testing, and I've seen this with many people. Even some people who I have mentored and worked with over a long time, they get into this comfort zone of, I'm just going to do pen testing. Pen testing is doing good. No, I'm able to feed myself. I'm getting things done. What's going to happen? Yeah, pen testing is definitely a good place to start. I would it's a good place to start, especially because you'll find some very interesting things. It gives you that dopamine hit, right?
Hmm.
Like, oh my God, I found
I
this
found
bug. It's
something.
so fun. I found something. Wow, it's awesome. That's great. And no doubt. And pen testing bug bounty is great. No problem. It will help you hone your skills. But remember, you have to become part of the solution, not
Hmm.
part of the problem. And in application security, too many of us are too content being part of the problem and not part of the solution. The solution is you have to work with engineering teams to improve security outcomes. So,
Mm.
what skills do you need for that? You need to think like an engineer for that. And for that, you need to get better and better and better at understanding apps, at understanding cloud native, at understanding DevSecOps, at understanding AI, at understanding all of these things. So you are constantly need to do research, and you constantly need to break and make yourself so that you get better at this space. So I think that is a way to a enduring great application security career. If you just want to do, pen testing, that's fine too. But remember, you'll never have an enduring great application security career. You'll
Mm.
have a decent, okay career.
That's how we say in cybersecurity or information security, before and getting into that, you need to know basics first. Because until
Yeah.
unless you don't know how solution work, you cannot able to break
Yeah.
it, neither secure it. Until unless you
Yeah.
don't know HTTP or you cannot able to secure HTTPS, because it's all about the security of sessions, how you carry
Yeah.
HTTPS traffic and all that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And do you recommend any free resources? Now, I'm sure not everyone has a budget to upgrade his career in DevSecOps and all that, or application security. Do you have any recommendation for the viewers, that this could be the free minimum things is there available on the internet which can help them to enhance their profiles and all that, or give them a basic learning before jump into any commercial trainings and all that?
Look, to be honest, I really think that the best place to learn anything from is just YouTube.
Hmm.
Things like free code camp and stuff like that. Just go on YouTube and go deeper and deeper and deeper into areas. So learn, you have free code camp. So learn a programming language.
Hmm.
Learn how to deploy that programming language using CI/CD with
Second,
Jenkins or
yeah.
something like that. You find all of this stuff on the internet, right?
Hmm.
You don't, I mean, especially on YouTube. I learn from YouTube all the time. Every day I spend hours and hours on YouTube, not
Hmm.
watching. Silently I watch that also, but the other videos and movie stuff and all that. But
Hmm.
really, the I learn is videos, really,
Hmm.
because a lot of stuff today, and I'll tell you why I prefer videos over books. Books, by the time somebody writes it and comes out with it, that technology is already past, right? A lot
Hmm.
of times it's already kind of gone, right? So, especially I'm doing a lot of work in the AI space now with RAG and AI security research and stuff like that. And I'm trying to look at areas which have still not been evolved yet, right? AI security is still security in AI and AI in security are still kind of very, very new spaces. So a lot of the stuff that I see is people are just doing streams on YouTube and putting stuff out, which is very interesting. And that itself has helped me learn a ton of stuff, right?
Hmm.
So that's really where I would just start with. I would just start with the easiest, simplest, accessible to all resource, which is YouTube. Just go on YouTube, learn a programming language. There are several tutorials. Try and learn something a little, something a little usable. Let's say a Python or JavaScript or
So
something.
program
You know,
in programming language, what should be the first language they should learn?
See, the easiest is to learn Python.
Okay.
It's generally the easiest, right? And it's also just yesterday, you might have seen this on GitHub Universe that Python has become the most popular programming language in the world. So you'll
Hmm.
find tons of tutorials, tons of things, tons of examples all over the internet for Python. So learn something like that, right? Just start with Python. Right? Understand Python, learn Python, build a web app with Python. That is
Hmm.
also super easy, right? It's very low intensity work. You can just take Flask or Django or something, just build a web app with Python. Some to-do app doesn't need to be very fancy. Just build something, right? Once you build see everything, the way I think, the way people learn, especially people coming out of college in India, the big problem, I mean, I'm not sure if your listeners are only in India, but I'm speaking from an Indian perspective because I did my college in India. So that's the
Hmm.
reason I'm using that as the perspective, right? Now, in India, what tends to happen is we are never taught in college to do any kind of research,
Hmm.
right? So we are always expected to get answers. This is the answer. Take this answer, implement it. So we need to unlearn that part of it, right? So we need to start doing projects. You need to think of, oh, I need to build this application for myself because
Hmm.
I want to do something. I want to file my income taxes this year. So let me build an application that will help me file income taxes. That can be a project that you do. Understand that that will take time. It's not easy. It's not easy. You will fall hundreds of times. There will be so many issues you'll face. There's so many things you'll have to debug. Do it. That's the way to do it. That's the way you have to figure it out. Once you do that, then deploy it on CI/CD or figure out how to deploy it on a CI/CD like GitHub Actions or Jenkins. All of this stuff is again free. You don't need anything more than a laptop to do any of this stuff, right? Then after that, start to figure out, okay, how do I do security for this? Where are the security issues? Okay, Python application, I have these database calls. This may be vulnerable to SQL injection. Try and figure that out. This may be vulnerable to CSRF. Try and figure that out. When I deploy it as a container, the container may be vulnerable to this. Try and figure that out. So every piece of tech that you worked on, break that down from a security perspective. That itself will put you in a better position than more than 70 to 80% of the people in this space. That's all. It's not, it's just the question of doing it. It's really not that fancy.
And actually, the reason of asking this, it's a very good structured learning you have shared. And there are very few resources available. That's the reason I asked that question. I'll be like, what should be the structured learning? Because there's everyone is talking about different type of roadmap, but what is exactly the roadmap? And that the one thing what you talk about, start with the programming, build the lab. That's a very good point you said. So now,
Yeah.
but Abhay, thank you for sharing that the thoughts and wisdom on this particular process. So my question here is, Abhay, like now there's a new trend is happening in the AppSec is DevSecOps. So
Mhm.
what is actually DevSecOps and how it is different from the traditional DevOps? If we talk about the perspective, yeah.
All right. Yeah. So DevSecOps really is I always tell people that DevSecOps is basically what AppSec should have been in the first place, right? So let me give you a little bit of historical background and then kind of bring it back to today, right? So if you look at what used to happen in companies was a very sequential way of building apps, right? So you'd use typically something called a waterfall method. I mean, even if somebody didn't call it a waterfall method, this is how they would do it, right? They would say that let's first write the spec. That would take maybe 1 month or 2 months. Then let's design that spec. Let's take another month or two. Then let's write the code for that application. That would take 6 months. Then that would finish. Let's do testing. During the
Mm,
testing phase, they would realize, hey, this is something we didn't even want. This is not what we wanted. Our business has changed. Every thing has changed. We don't want this. And that's why application development kept failing and failing and failing and failing, which is why we went to more agile methodology, right? We said that, okay, we are going to take up smaller stories and things like that and build it in a sprint. Every sprint is going to be 4 weeks. After the sprint is done, we're going to show something. The customer is going to see it, and then we are going to build more and more and more. But we are going to break it down into smaller pieces. Now, one of the things that happened because of this entire way of building applications was that the application development process became much faster, right? The way
mm,
we built applications became much faster. We started to see tools also become faster. We moved from old school source management systems like CVS and SVN to Git. Git started emerging because Git was needed to for you to be able to develop things faster and collaborate faster. Git was needed. You started adding tools like Jira and stuff like that that would build the stories and agile methodology in house. Then you started seeing the emergence of CI tools like Jenkins, all of these tools, because you wanted to integrate code into the repositories every so often. So application development started moving at a blisteringly fast pace. Then you had containers that came in, you had infrastructure as code that came in. Things started moving at a blisteringly fast pace. Right? Application development became super fast. Now, where was security in all this? Security didn't change. Security didn't change at all. And that kind of comes back to my first point, which is security was just sitting in the side saying, okay, once you are done with everything, you just send it to me. I will review it for security and tell you whether you can move ahead or not. But that's not what the development teams are doing, right? Development teams today are wanting to do things continuously.
mm.
There is this, I don't know whether how true it is, but I've read somewhere that Amazon deploys code every 11.6 seconds. No, every
Microservices and
11.6
integration,
seconds.
yeah.
Yeah, so I've heard of this, but
Mm,
again, I don't know how true it is. But if they do, or even let us say that they do 3 times a day, forget 11.6 seconds. Let's say Amazon deploys code even 3 times a day. The amount of change that's happening in the code base is massive, right? So, and security, if they do it once, we do quarterly pen test or something like that. It's making no sense. If I do annual threat model, it's making no sense. If I do like an annual vulnerability scan, everybody does this quarterly threat pen test or quarterly vulnerability scan. It's absolutely senseless because by the time that pentest report is released itself, it will be 3 months and the application would have changed 20 times.
I agree.
So this was back in 2014 or so. Many of my customers are coming to me and saying that, hey, you know what, you guys are doing pen testing and all that. So I run, just for your understanding and for your listeners as well, I run another company called V45 where we do only application security services. AppSecEngineer is the training piece. This is just the services. So there, a lot of my customers are saying that, look, you know, you are giving us, you're doing this, you're finding so many bugs, but we're not able to get ahead of this problem. We're not able
Hmm.
to get ahead of this issue. How do we get ahead of the problem? How do we fix the problem so that it stays fixed?
Hmm.
And I started thinking about this. This was 2014. We had just started to see the emergence of DevOps, especially with Chef and Docker and all that had come in that time. I don't know if you remember this. At the time, Chef and Docker had come in. So I was thinking about, okay, we need to think about how we can embed security in each and every stage of the software development lifecycle
Hmm.
so that we catch security bugs as early as we can. So in 2015, in fact, I wrote the world's first DevSecOps training. That was the time I wrote it. And we released it, and I trained at DC, and I trained at Black Hat and all that. I still train at Black Hat even today. So there, I realized that, okay, if you are able to embed security practices at
Hmm.
different stages of the SDLC, you are able to catch the security bugs as early as you can.
Hmm.
If you are able to catch the security bugs as early as possible, the chances that it will make it to production are very low. So, for instance, if you are able to think about, okay, I'm building these three features in this sprint. This feature has an authorization issue. This feature has mostly an authentication set of issues. This feature has a cryptography set of issues. Then I can, in the development phase itself, I can fix that or
Hmm.
prefix it
Hmm.
before it even goes to production. And in
Hmm.
the development stage, I can run static analysis tools, I can run source composition analysis tools, make sure that it doesn't even make it to the point of testing. So by the time it is even coming to the testing stage, I'm able to completely solve a lot of my security risk
Hmm.
even before. So the point of DevSecOps is basically this, right? It allows you to add multiple feedback loops at different stages of the SDLC that are security oriented. That's it.
So
There's
we can
nothing
say
more to
it's
it.
more like a security by design instead of security by implementation, the way we see overall the infosec
Security
vertical.
by design, yeah, to a certain extent, that would definitely fall into the category of security by design. Security by design has a few more additional parameters to think about.
Hmm.
Security by design may also be things about think. See, just by implementing DevSecOps, you're not implementing security by design.
Hmm.
You also need to think about things like, okay, what are the libraries I'm using? Can this library eliminate an entire class of flaws? That can also help
Hmm.
you with security by design.
Hmm.
When I'm designing the feature itself, can I design it in a way that security is part of the functional requirements rather
Hmm.
than what we would call non-functional requirements?
Hmm.
Is security baked into every single feature that I build in? That is really security by design.
So
This is a part of it, yes, but not the entire thing.
yeah, well, security will run parallelly. Like if I say in design stage, we are integrating threat modeling with using
Yeah,
Stride or Pasta. So
yeah.
well, like though some of the viewers, like 60% of the viewers, might be not come from the development background and all that. So is it possible? Can you just take your 5 minutes to explain the end-to-end process of DevSecOps? Will be great, useful for us. Where you talk about a lot of term about CI, CD, and all that. Get is it possible? Can you just share your insight on that area in a layman term so they can also understand?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I'll do my best. Let me see what I can do. Okay, so let's say you want to build, let's say, a corporate expense management application.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's take that as an example.
Hmm.
So this is an application where I, as an employee, can upload some expenses. So let's say I incur some expenses that I have for when I go on business trips, and I incur these expenses. I share these expenses with my project manager. My project manager can approve it, and then the expense gets reimbursed to me. So
Hmm.
that is the over application and how it works. Now let's talk a little bit about let's look at the end-to-end DevSecOps workflow for something like this.
Hmm.
Right, let's say I'm picking up two or three features in this sprint. Let's say the feature I'm picking up is that a user can upload some expense information and some expense receipts, whatever it is, and the user can get the project manager can approve. Let's say those are the two features I'm taking up in this sprint. My sprint is, let's say, 2 weeks.
Hmm.
Now, the idea of DevSecOps is that by the end of the sprint, you ideally have to release a secure version of these two features. That's the idea. So the idea would be, the ideal state would be that by the end of the sprint, we are releasing a secure two features, these two features. Now, the first step in the sprint would be to do a sprint planning or design review, right? How do we do, what do we take up, what are the considerations, what are these features, what do these features mean, etc., etc. At that time, you want to include security into the design. Say that, okay, what can happen? What are the abuses that can happen? What are the threats to these two features that we're building today or building this sprint? Then they say that, okay, somebody can upload some malicious code into this, or somebody who's not the project manager can approve this, blah, 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 blah. We design all this stuff. And then we say that these are the security features we need to build for each of these features. So along with the core feature, we need to make sure that these are the security attributes that we keep in mind. Okay? So we create that as a specification. That specification goes to the developer. Now the developer writes the code for the functionality. They also write the code for the security specification as described. So once that is done, the developer starts checking their code into a Git server or a GitHub or GitLab or whatever it is. Once they check in, there is an automated process of static analysis that runs that says, okay, I'm scanning your code for security issues. You have an injection bug here. You have an authorization bug here. You have this. You need to fix it before that code is committed to the main branch, right? So the developer fixes that. The code is committed. The code, when the developer creates a pull request, the code is committed to the main branch. Now, from the main branch, the code is built into a, let's say, a Docker container. Now, during that build time itself, there will be a lot of checks around, okay, let's say, whether the libraries that they're using are vulnerable. If there is a vulnerability in the libraries, the build will stop. Let's say the build will fail, right? So then it will say that, okay, you need to fix this library. This library is vulnerable to this issue. Then the developer patches, or somebody patches the library, and then they use a new library and they test it, and then they build the container. This container goes into a server. This server is deployed. Then they run a whole bunch of security checks for the server as well. And then they can run Dash. They can run a whole bunch of other things. Some infrastructure as code stuff. Finally, you've deployed it. So at each stage of the development process, you are including security checkpoints versus before, where you are introducing the security checkpoints only at the end.
Okay.
That is the difference between a more traditional security program versus a DevSecOps-led security program.
That's a great insight. Actually, I got some new insight and I got some content reference. So that's the reason, I'm going to apply the same principle in the security session, which I take, like CISSP, CSLP. And thanks Abhay for, sharing that particular thing. And I'm sorry, I just extended this podcast with some extra topics. Yeah. Sorry for that. I'm bad with some questions sometime.
So, no, it was all relevant questions, good questions.
Thank you. So, when you're talking about DevSecOps, what are the core principles of DevSecOps according to you? Like we say, in Agile, we say collaboration over the documentation, no documentation, process over the documentations and all that. So, what are the core principles of DevSecOps according to you?
Yeah, I don't think there are any established principles like you would see with the Agile Manifesto yet. I've not seen anything like that very formally written down. But the way I see it,
not written, but as a DevSecOps practitioner and all that.
Yeah. So my opinions on this are basically this, right? So one, I would say, automate as many repeatable activities as you can, right? So that would be one of the big things for me.
Why?
Because really the benefits of DevSecOps is derived when you automate all the mundane, repeatable activities.
Okay.
When you try and do too much manual intervention is where you will run into issues. Because remember, security practitioners are very few. You don't have too many security practitioners. And you don't have, again, competence of those security practitioners is also not always consistent. So you want to make sure that you automate away as many repeatable process, or like static analysis, definitely worth automating.
Hmm.
Source composition analysis and SBOMs and stuff like that, definitely worth automating.
Hmm.
To a certain extent, even today, threat modeling, if you can do a little bit of automation around that. Baselines, if you can do a little bit of automation around that, that would be great. Things like secure defaults, you can apply. So that, I mean, that's not really automation, but you are really eliminating entire classes of flaws. Doing some kind of training also helps you achieve that level of some level of competence there. But really automate as many repeatable processes as you can. That would be one principle that I can share. The second principle is introduce as many feedback loops early in the cycle as possible.
Hmm.
Right? So feedback loops is basically telling a developer or a tester or whatever it is that, hey, there is this bug here, there is this security issue here. The feedback loop has to be in a way that they understand, right? I don't know if you've seen this, but when you go to a developer with a PDF pen test report,
Hmm.
nobody's interested in looking at that. Nobody
Agree.
cares.
Agree.
Nobody cares. They look at it like as if it is like, okay, what do I do with this? It's no use. But at the same time, if I take that same finding and put it in as a Jira ticket and assign it to them, they will much more, there's higher likelihood of them solving that problem. The
Hmm.
reason for that is the language they're used to. That is the system and workflow they're used to. So what you need to do is create feedback loops that are in their language, in their
Hmm.
workflow.
Hmm.
Not expecting them to read some fancy PDF report with CVSS scores and stuff like that. Nobody cares,
Agree.
right? Literally nobody cares. So you have to understand that you need to speak the engineer's language or the engineering team's language
Hmm.
to adopt, to get adoption, and not expect them to follow yours. You are an enabler for them. That is what you need to ensure. And not make sure that, okay, I'm a security person, I should have my own respect in this team. Let them come to me. Nobody's going to care about you or your team, right? So that is very, very critical. You have to see yourself as a partner
Hmm.
in engineering. And see, that used to be the case with quality assurance. I don't know if you remember this. A lot of QA engineers used to be kind of left out of the loop. Then QA became automated, right? Quite a lot of
Hmm.
QA became automated. So you started to see that developers now are taking QA problems as regular problems,
Problem. Yeah.
as bugs. Security problems are treated as security problems, which are somehow,
Hmm.
I don't know why, very, very
Hmm.
complicated and mystical. Security problems are also bugs. Same thing. Security problem is a quality problem. Quality problem is an engineering problem. So all things are engineering problems. So understand that and don't expect, this differentiation in behavior. And you should make sure that you don't differentiate in behavior as well. So I would say these are two definite principles. But other than that, yeah, really try to build with secure defaults. Don't try and include stuff that is not necessary. Don't, all those things are typically things that I would advocate as well.
Thanks, Abhay, taking out the time for this principal part to discuss. And if someone is looking for a jobs in DevSecOps, what are the some entry level roles in DevSecOps they're looking? See, if you are about the pen testing, we say okay, interns in pen testing we hire, SOC L1 we hire, GRC analyst we hire. We know we are very clear about their jobs. But what are the entry
Mhm.
level jobs for DevSecOps? If someone complete their DevSecOps training from you, or they did the transition from software development to the application security and then DevSecOps. So,
Mhm.
what are the entry level jobs for DevSecOps professionals? What kind of a industry they should target?
So DevSecOps, by its own nature, is that it's not super entry level in itself, right?
Hmm.
DevSecOps, generally, when you are moving into a role like DevSecOps, you are not entry level. You are kind
Hmm.
of a little bit more than entry level.
Hmm.
I would say that the entry level would probably be a security engineer or a junior security engineer type of thing. So
Hmm.
security engineer, in my view, is somebody who's able to engineer certain types of security solutions for their team, right? So
Hmm.
somebody who's able to set up a SAST pipeline or able
Hmm.
to set up some kind of a container scanning pipeline, whatever it
Hmm.
is, right?
Hmm.
So those I would say are more entry level jobs.
Hmm.
Once you go past that, and when you move it to a slightly more architectural view of things, that is when I would say the real benefits of DevSecOps gets unlocked. So whatever you learn, even at the entry level, try and get into security engineering roles. It doesn't matter in which domain of AppSec. It could be security engineering on the cloud side. It could be security engineering on the Kubernetes side. It could be security engineering on the general application side. Wherever it is,
Hmm.
try and get into one of those roles and then evolve from that role into more senior architecture style roles where you're doing threat modeling, you're doing security architecture, you're doing all of that stuff, right? So that's really where that is the kind of roadmap and path that I think one should take in that.
That's
And you can
excellent.
even super specialize. You can super specialize. You can do cloud security architect, or,
Hmm.
a little bit more specific.
And when it comes to the tools part, what are the essential tools a beginner or what are the experts should be familiarized when they involved in DevSecOps?
See the tools.
Because like the in pen testing we say Kali Linux, Metasploit. Okay, like in GRC we say Archer. You should be familiarized with Archer and all that. In SOC Splunk is there, Wireshark is there. So what about the DevSecOps?
So in DevSecOps, I would say the tools that you would really need to know are the DevOps tools, right? So things like
Hmm.
GitHub Actions, you really
Hmm.
need to know that pretty well. You need to know infrastructure as code pretty well.
Hmm.
Things like, let's say you're working with a cloud company, things like Terraform, stuff like that. You'll probably need to know very well. When it comes to security tooling, static analysis is where a lot things like a knowledge of SBOM and software bill of materials is something that you should know ideally. Static
Hmm.
analysis today has largely become about tools like SemGrep and stuff like that, which is very powerful tool that a lot of companies use.
Hmm.
So really, I would say that the focus should be on learning categories of technology more than just tools, because the tools are very dependent on the languages and the stacks, right? So, for instance, let's say you're building something in Rust. The
Hmm.
tools are very different in Rust than for, let's say, Python or for Java or JavaScript. So, the language dictates the tools. So,
Hmm.
it's very important to understand things that every language can use, right? So, that is, generic, slightly more, and then specialize into something more specific.
So, but we have a lot of open source tools also, right? If some freshers want to
Yeah.
start the things and all that. So, do you have any recommendation for that, which can be
So I
a
would
student?
definitely say that, yeah, I mean, SemGrep is a very popular tool that is very useful. It works. I mean, you can use that open source. A lot of companies hire for SemGrep skills,
Hmm.
especially for security engineers. Nuclei, which is a DAST tool, very
Hmm.
popular tool that a lot of pen testers use, a lot of security engineers use, definitely useful. Things like knowing, again, the if you have skills around managing like things like Vault or Kubernetes per se itself,
Hmm.
you're likely to get a much more much better job in this market space. So yeah, so these are the kind of things. So many of these are open source tools. In fact, even if you look at knowing things like Dash, like Zap and stuff like that, that can
Hmm.
help you.
Hmm.
But again, with DevSecOps, you need to know how to automate these tools. That's the most
Hmm.
important thing. How
Hmm.
do you automate tools? Like OWASP dependency track is an open source tool, but how do you automate the dash this source composition analysis workflow? That's really something that you need to focus on. It's a little different in its orientation.
And I've seen one of your posts from where I'm following you on your LinkedIn about
Hmm.
shifting left. You are
Hmm.
a strong advocate of shifting left. So, can
Hmm.
you explain the concept of shifting left in the DevSecOps and why it is important in today era?
So shifting left really comes from the fact that you want to. So if you look at the development life cycle, right? You have your requirements, you have your design, you have your development, you have your testing, your deployment,
Hmm.
and you have your post deployment. You ideally want to identify security issues as early as possible in the cycle, which is left side of the cycle,
Hmm.
and not on the right side. Because the more you move towards, like, okay, if you wait for the product to be deployed and then scan it for security, then it's too late because it's already in production and it's a problem. So the point here of shifting left is try and find security issues as early as possible in the cycle and as
Hmm.
often in that cycle as you can.
Hmm.
And that's really what shifting left is. So that's why I say do things like threat modeling, do things like architecture review, security defaults, etc., etc. Things like that. Do it as early as possible in the cycle rather than later, because you'll find those security issues as early as possible rather than later.
Okay. Thanks, Abhay. And I'm sorry, there's a one more question which came out from my mind from the one you're talking about the context of AppSec and DevSecOps. There's a lot of doubt
Sure.
among the people about what is the difference between the AppSec and DevSecOps, or
Mm.
there's a lot of buzzword around AppSec and DevSecOps. So can you just help me out with this last question?
See, I don't actually see much of a difference between AppSec and DevSecOps.
Hmm.
Like I said, DevSecOps is really what AppSec should be.
Okay.
But what we have as AppSec today is mostly around, okay, how do I secure apps? How do I test apps? How do I do static analysis? But if you think about it, all those things are really what is there in DevSecOps as well.
Hmm.
So in my view, there is there is no difference between
Okay.
AppSec and DevSecOps, or at least there should be no difference between AppSec and DevSecOps.
Hmm.
AppSec is overall how do you secure applications, and the way to secure applications would be to use DevSecOps.
Understood.
Let me put it that way. Yeah.
To the point.
Yeah.
But thanks, Abhay. It's been a 1 hour, and I don't know how the time ran, but it was a great catch, and there was a lot of key points we have covered in this podcast. And I always ask this question is to my viewers who watching this podcast on do let us know, shall we disturb again Abhay for the another podcast, because I want him for the another podcast where we have to discuss in detail about shift left and all that. So, guys, this is the opportunity for us because it's a live, so he cannot say no to that, or it's online. He cannot say no to that. We say on gunpoint, we say for us, the social media is the online is a gunpoint for us. So we can ask anything away on this. And Away, really, really honor for us, really honor for us to have you and the way you have shared your thoughts, your wisdom on DevSecOps and all that. It's really amazing, and keep up the same work. So before we wind up, Abhay, like what is Abhay is doing now? Like, what is his current profile? What he into now? Are you doing training and consulting? So what is the last message to the viewers who are watching this video?
Yeah, so in terms of what I've been doing, AppSecEngineer is a big part of what I do.
Hmm.
AppSecEngineer, for those of you who don't know, is a training platform
Hmm.
for AppSec product security stuff, right? So
Hmm.
things like AppSec, DevSecOps, cloud security, Kubernetes security, threat modeling. So it's like a one-stop place where you can learn all of these things
Hmm.
with very, very engaging labs. So it follows
Hmm.
my model of learning, which is basically using labs. Aside from that, I run a consulting company called V45, which does AppSec consulting, testing, threat modeling, architecture reviews, and so on. I'm right now, a lot of my work nowadays is really leveraging things like AI in AppSec,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I'm looking at some very interesting use cases. I think probably in a position to talk about this a little bit more structurally from January. A
Hmm.
lot of my work will culminate in the December, January timeframe. So yeah,
Hmm.
looking forward to seeing how that goes as well.
And you wrote a book also, right?
I have written a couple of books. One
Okay.
is a book on Java security. This
Hmm.
was long back.
Hmm.
Then I wrote another book again long back, which is on PCI compliance.
Hmm.
Basically, because when I used to go into PCI compliance, I used to see a lot of PCI audits. I used to see a lot of people struggle with things. So this was basically the way to address some of those struggles.
Hmm.
After that, really, I'm not. Those two are the books I've written. After that, I've not written any books. Most of my work has gone into content development on AppSecEngineer videos, and stuff that I write on LinkedIn,
Hmm.
Twitter.
And keep up that, because your content is inspiring a lot of professionals who making a career in apps, like especially like me also. I'm doing a
No,
shift. I'm doing a shift from JRC to the pen testing and AppSec. So keep up the same work and inspire others with your content.
thank you so much, Prabh. I appreciate it.
So this is all from our side, team. And for more information, to subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to make sure you should not miss the future videos on a similar topic. Thank you so much. Good day. Bye.